Privileged to host Dr. Sizer, a distinguished speaker in this field who provide valuable insights on this crucial topic. In conclusions, I express my gratitude to Prof. Nazari and his team from the Hashim Sani Center for Palestine Studies, University Malaya, for facilitating the presence of our esteemed speaker at University Malaya to shed light on the topic of inevitable solutions to the Palestinian plight. A heartfelt thanks you to all participants for being part of this program, and by the grace of Allah, may it be fruitful for everyone. Wassalam.
Thank you, Dr. Asmawati Muhammad, for the opening speech. Ladies and gentlemen, now we have come to our main agenda, the special lecture session. Without further ado, let us welcome our moderator, Professor Dr. Nazari Ismail, Director, Hashim Sani Center for Palestine Studies, University Malaya, and our honorable speaker, Dr. Stephen Robert Sizer, Director, Peacemaker Trust Chair of the Convivencia Alliance, to the stage. All the discussion and Q&A session will be moderated by Professor Dr. Nazari Ismail. Before that, allow me to first introduce our moderator. Professor Dr. Muhammad Nazari Ismail is an honorary professor at the Faculty of Business and Economics, University of Malaya, and Director of Hashim Sani Center for Palestine Studies, University Malaya. He is the chairman of BDS Malaysia, Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions Malaysia, a movement that calls for boycott of Israel and boycott of companies that are complicit with Israel. He is also the chairman of Palestine Progressive Association Malaysia. He was one of the participants of Freedom Flotilla boat to Gaza in 2018. He obtained his Bachelor of Science Economics honours from the University of Wales, now Cardiff University, United Kingdom, Masters of Business Administration MBA from the State University of New York, USA, and PhD from the University of Manchester, United Kingdom. He was the 1999 Fulbright Foundation Malaysian Scholar at the University of Michigan at Ann Arbor, USA, the 2005 Fulbright Visiting Specialist at Pfeiffer University, North Carolina, and 2005 Visiting Fellow at Oxford Center for Islamic Studies, Oxford, United Kingdom. He is also the former Dean of Faculty of Business and Accounting and former Head of University of Malaya Corporate Planning Unit. He has written 6 books. His book entitled Till Death Do Us Part, The Growth of the Global Banking Industry and Its Insidious Effects, was one of the winners of the 2019 National Book Award in the Economics category. So ladies and gentlemen, it's now time to pass the mic to our esteemed moderator for this special lecture session. Please join me in welcoming Professor Dr. Nazari Ismail to guide us through today's insightful discussion.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning to everyone. Thank you for coming to this event this morning, organized by Hashim Sani Center and the Center for Civilization and Dialogue. Thank you to the center and its leadership for agreeing to collaborate to organize this event. We flew in Dr. Stephen Sizer all the way from UK in order to deliver this talk and also to participate in our conference, which is going to be held on Wednesday and Thursday, tomorrow and Thursday at the International Islamic IAIS, International Institute of Advanced Islamic Studies. So if you are interested to come and listen to more discussions on the issue of Palestine, you are most welcome to join the conference, 2-day conference. And we have other speakers also coming. including Saul Takahashi from Japan, and also speakers, Palestinian speakers. Some will be online and some will be face-to-face. Okay, but for today, we have a special lecture by Dr. Stephen, and his CV is very long because he's active in many fields. I suggest you go to his website and you will read more about him. I'll just read some of the aspects of his activism. Dr. Stephen is the founder and director of Peacemaker Trust, a registered charity dedicated to peacemaking, especially where minorities are persecuted, where justice is denied, human rights are suppressed, or reconciliation is needed. He's also he is the bishop's chaplain to the Right Reverend Ria Abu El-Asal, the retired Anglican bishop in Jerusalem. He was ordained in 1983 and served as a curate in St. Leonard's-on-Sea, Sussex, and was appointed curate in charge, then rector of St. John's Stoke, Guildford in Surrey, and vicar of Virginia Water from 1987, where he served for 20 years until his retirement in 2017. He's also involved in Palestinian issues. Actually, he is a member of the Jewish Network for Palestine, which brings together many Jews and non-Jews who support Palestine and act to counter the lies of the Israel lobby. The JNP, or the Jewish Network for Palestine, aims to change the public debate in Britain and further the discussion of a political resolution to the conflict in Palestine. As you know, Britain supplied weapons to Israel recently to kill Palestinians, so you can imagine the challenges faced by Dr. Stephen in his activism. He is also the first director of the Institute for the Study of Christian Zionism, a new multi-dimensional research institute launched in the summer 2023. The institute will promote rigorous analysis, documentation, research, and advocacy to expose, challenge, and confront the heresy of Christian Zionism. And it is intended to become the main website portal for the study, critique, and response to Christian Zionism. Some of you who are here, I believe, are interested to know this aspect. So you can always ask him, because his focus will be on this topic, but he says he's willing to go deeper on the issue of Christian Zionism. I will just go to his academic background. Stephen gained his BA in Geography from Sussex University in 1976. Many of us were not been born yet at that time. A diploma in higher education in theology from Trinity College, Bristol in 1983. And he was awarded a Master's in Theology with distinction from Oxford University in 1994. His thesis examined the ethical management of pilgrimage to the Holy Land. In 2004, he was awarded a PhD by Oak Hill College and Middlesex University. His thesis examined the historical roots, theological bases, and political consequences of Christian Zionism in Britain and the USA from 1820. And he has authored 3 books. The first is In the Footsteps of Jesus and the Apostles, Christian Zionism, A Roadmap to Armageddon, and Zion Christian Soldiers, the Bible, Israel, and the Church. And his books have been translated into Arabic, Farsi, Korean, and Spanish. So hopefully the center can also translate his books into Malay. Without further ado, may I invite Stephen to come to the stage and make his presentation.
It is a great delight to be with you today. Thank you to Professor Bahruddin for the kind invitation to give this lecture. I also want to thank Mrs. Norma Hashim and Professor Dr. Ismail of the Hashim Sani Center for Palestine Studies for co-hosting this lecture and also sponsoring my visit. I arrived very late last night. I got to bed about 1 o'clock in the morning, and my suitcase was in Singapore last night, so I'm not quite dressed the way I wish to be today, but hopefully it will arrive later today. The title I've been given is The Inevitable Solutions to the Palestinian Plight. And I'm always fascinated when I'm given a title to try and work out what I'm expected to say. Because I always want to please the people who invite me, so I get invited back. So the two key words are inevitable and solutions, which juxtaposed seem a little contradictory. But the fact is, there are many solutions to the Palestinian plight, some positive and some negative. I'm going to measure on 3, which are mutually exclusive. How then can they be inevitable? Well, let me illustrate. Climate change is inevitable. It is happening. Sea levels are rising. Global temperatures are rising. But the solutions, plural, depend very much upon each one of us, how we adjust our lifestyles, our motivation to make changes that will influence climate change. And it's very easy to think it's someone else's responsibility rather than our own. So we're looking at inevitable solutions today. Now, I often encounter people who insist the issue is too intractable, too complicated to resolve. They accept the Zionist narrative that this is a centuries-old struggle between Jews and Muslims, and that a lasting peace is impossible. Even worse, they insist this perpetual conflict is predicted in the Hebrew and Christian scriptures. Now, although not directly related, my research has been primarily into the origins of Zionism, and they show that Christian Zionism preceded Jewish Zionism by at least 50 years. And today, at least 9 out of 10 Zionists are Christians. So Zionism is primarily a Christian political theory, not a Jewish one. And the solution lies heavily in shaping the Christian understanding of peacemaking in the Middle East, not the Jewish one. Which is why Netanyahu, preceding his bombing of Gaza, cited the Bible to justify what he was doing. He was appealing to his Christian Zionist lobby to continue to veto criticism of Israel in the UN and so on. But if you're interested in Christian Zionism, okay, down here, my PowerPoint's been clipped, is my website, StephenSizer.com, StephenSizer.com, S-I-Z-E-R. And on the website, you can access the whole of this presentation, so you don't need to make notes if you don't wish to. I'm going to fast for you. The text is there, PDF, a Word file, as well as all of my books and all of my writings are freely available from my website. You don't need to pay for the books. Okay. So what I've attempted to do through my writings is show that the primary cause of the conflict is Christian Zionism. Over 30 years ago, I began to give an annual lecture to 16-year-old students in a grammar school in Guildford. Once a year, they invited me in to do a talk on the Arab-Israeli conflict. And as you know, when you're dealing with teenagers, you need to keep their attention and you need to hold them accountable. So I would begin by saying there's going to be homework. And they would all be going, oh, there's homework. Now I have to say there's going to be homework for you as well. So please pay attention. But I'll come to the homework at the end. But I'm going to be using a very simple illustration that's transferable. Once you've got it, you'll be able to share it with people who have not come today. Okay, that's my aim. I wonder if you can remember visiting your grandparents. The role of grandparents is to spoil their grandchildren. Okay? Spoil the grandchildren. I do my grandchildren. And you imagine visiting your grandparents, and grandmother gives you the cookie jar and says, have a biscuit, a cookie. And being the greedy little child that you are, you stick your hand in and you grab 3 sweets, 3 cookies. The problem is you can't get your hand out of the jar. It's stuck in the jar. The fact is, Israel has got its hand stuck in the cookie jar. It wants 3 cookies and it can only have 2. And as long as it's holding the 3, it will never enjoy them. It will never find peace and security, because it has to give up one of the cookies. As long as it refuses to let go of one of those 3, peace and security remains an illusion, and the Palestinian plight grows worse, as we see in Gaza today. What are the 3 cookies? Israel wants to be a democracy, it wants to be a Jewish state, and it wants all the land from the river of Egypt to the Euphrates, or from the river Jordan to the Mediterranean. Giving up one of these 3 will resolve the Palestinian plight. So what are the 3 alternatives? The first is the 2-state solution. This is the position favoured by the United Nations, by the majority of countries represented in the UN, because the acquisition of territory by war is inadmissible in international law. If a country could get away with stealing the land of its neighbours, then everyone would do it. A war is between peoples, and it must not be conducted to take land away from our enemies or from our neighbours or opponents. Therefore, the seizure, occupation and colonization of the occupied territories from Jordan, Gaza from Egypt in 1967, and the annexation of East Jerusalem and the Golan from Syria is illegal in international law. But after 55 years, it's clearly not a temporary occupation. Since 1967, Israel has expanded its colonies, making life unbearable for Palestinians living under military occupation. The 2-state solution, based on the 1967 borders recognized by the UN, insists that Palestine should become a separate, contiguous, sovereign, independent Palestinian state. And Israel can be a Jewish democracy on the 67 borders. Palestinian Israelis can live as a minority in Israel, or they can go and live in Palestine. Israeli settlers can either live under Palestinian authority in the occupied territories in Palestine, or they can move back into Israel. That is the 2-state solution. The sticking point is Israel's increasingly extremist government, which has rejected the 2-state solution and has no intention of freezing, let alone withdrawing, its illegal Jewish settlements. Now, politicians are already talking about post-Gaza, and we see President Biden and other European leaders talking about reviving the 2-state solution. The problem is they do not mean the 2 states based on the 1967 borders. They do not aspire to see the withdrawal of Israeli settlements. What they envisage is what we have now, which is the ghettos, the Bantustans, Nablus, Jenin, Tulkarm, Ramallah, East Jerusalem, Bethlehem, Hebron, Gaza. These are Palestinian urban centers. They are isolated and they are surrounded by exclusive Jewish settlements, exclusive Jewish roads, the separation wall, and they are under the control of the Israeli military. Any future Palestinian state based on the Bantustans or Palestines would therefore neither be sovereign, independent, or contiguous, and therefore it is totally unacceptable. It would be demilitarized and it would have no international borders. It's precisely what the South African government did in South Africa. They created Bantustans for the blacks to live in their townships, surrounded by white-controlled areas. Jeff Halper, who is the founder of the Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions, says that a Palestinian state must have control over its international borders. It must be territorial contiguous. That is, the West Bank would have to be a coherent state territory with all of the settlements removed. It would have to have, within its national territory, it would have to have sovereign control over all its resources: water, land, minerals, tourist attractions. East Jerusalem would have to be part of a sovereign Palestinian state. And opposed to Israel's demand that the Palestinian state be demilitarized, it would have to have the ability to defend its sovereignty and territory. And finally, a non-negotiable right of the refugees and their descendants to return from exile, from being refugees in Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, and other countries. So if Biden's attempt is to be more than a cosmetic maneuver to present a chain of Israeli-controlled Bantustans as a Palestinian state, it must embrace the following conditions. So what are the prospects of Israel withdrawing unilaterally to the 1967 borders, removing all its illegal settlements? Zero. It has no incentive. As long as the United States continues to fund Israel nearly $4 billion a year, provides the latest military hardware, and blocks all censure in the United Nations. So that is the two-state solution. And I think I've explained why it's not going to happen. So what is the alternative? The alternative to a two-state solution is the one-state solution. Remember, Israel's got its hand in the cookie jar. If it won't give up the West Bank, Gaza, the 1967 borders, it must give up being a Jewish state. This is the one-state solution. If you remember, the American Civil War was fought over whether the United States would have slavery in the South and emancipation in the North. It took a civil war to bring the two together and bring slavery to an end. Yes, there is still prejudice, yes, there is still segregation, but at least it's not slavery. South Africa, was it going to be an apartheid state, or was it going to recognize the equal rights of blacks and whites? So the one-state solution is the alternative. From the River Jordan to the Mediterranean Sea, including the right of return for Palestinian refugees and their families expelled in 1948 and 67. In this regard, the One Democratic State campaign insists that since Israel has eliminated the two-state solution in its relentless campaign to colonize Palestine, the idea of a single democratic state as the best political solution for the peoples inhabiting historic Palestine has gained support in recent years. And the irony is that it is not a new idea, because the Palestinian liberation movement before the Nakba of 1948 and after had promoted this vision. The goal of establishing a single secular democratic state was ensconced in the PLO National Charter. However, to become a reality, Israel would have to repeal the nation-state law. Passed in 2018, the nation-state law insists that the right to exercise national self-determination in Israel is unique to the Jewish people. No reference to Arab Israelis, to Palestinians. Israel is for Jews and Jews alone. Secondly, the nation-state law insists that Hebrew is Israel's official language, and it downgrades Arabic. When I used to travel to Palestine 20, 30 years ago, all the road signs were in Hebrew, Arabic and English. Now they are in Hebrew. Arabic is gone. And then thirdly, the nation-state law insists that Jewish settlement is a national value, meaning the settlements, the colonies, are part of the vision of a Jewish state. So with Israeli society becoming more extremist, more racist, more xenophobic, is it conceivable that Israel would repeal the nation-state law, give up being a Jewish state, and recognize all Palestinians as equal citizens with equal rights? Again, the answer is no, not yet. They have no incentive. So the two-state solution is a non-starter. The one-state solution is aspirational, but Israel is going in the opposite direction. So, Israel has its hand in the cookie jar. It won't give up the land. It won't give up being a Jewish state. What is the third alternative? The third alternative is to recognize that Israel is not a democracy. They boast that they are the only democracy in the Middle East. It's not a democracy. Clearly there are shades of democracy around our world. Some are better than others, some have more individual rights than others. But the reality is, Israel is an apartheid state. It's not a democracy. It's perpetuating genocide and ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people. The word apartheid describes the institutionalized racial segregation that existed in South Africa and what became Namibia from 1948 to the early 1990s. Amnesty International describes apartheid as a violation of public international law, a grave violation of internationally protected human rights, and a crime against humanity under international criminal law. And the 1973 UN International Convention on the Suppression and Punishment of the Crime of Apartheid, and the 1998 Rome Statute to the International Criminal Court defined apartheid as a crime against humanity consisting of three elements: the intent to maintain domination by one racial group over another, a context of systematic oppression by one racial group over another, and inhuman acts as the means by which that domination was being perpetuated. So, for example, in Gaza, clearly the Israeli regime is not primarily concerned about destroying Hamas. They need someone in Gaza to manage Gaza. They don't want to have to do that. But destroying hospitals, destroying schools, destroying the infrastructure, destroying half the homes in Gaza is disproportionate. It is genocide. The intent we believe, we fear, is to force Palestinians out of Gaza into the Egyptian desert, another Nakba, so that Gaza can be annexed by Israel, and then they will have no qualms about exploiting the gas and oil off the Gaza coast. They're already signing deals with major oil companies to begin to benefit from those assets. So this is the crime of apartheid. The irony is that the Israeli government uses the same word, apartheid, to describe its wall. The separation wall in Hebrew is hafrada. It's a Hebrew word, hafrada. It's identical to apartheid. Apartheid simply means separate. Separatehood. Apartheid. Separatehood. That's what the wall means. And as you look at the root of the wall, it is intended to maximize the territorial claim of the West Bank and minimize the number of Palestinians living in what will become what's left of Palestine. They want to force the Palestinians out of the land that they wish to take. Jeff Halper, so that was intended to show the parallels between the signs that you used to see in South Africa and the signs you see near the Palestinian towns. You can't quite see, but the word hafrada is identical to the word apartheid. Jeff Halper, the founder of the Israeli Committee Against House Demolitions, publishes a very helpful map. It's called the Matrix of Control. Gentlemen, if you've ever had a hernia operation, or ladies, if you've ever had a cesarean, you'll know that they don't simply sew you up because it will tear. The way that they sew you up is by layers of sewing of tissue, so that, like a piece of cloth, there is strength in repairing the wound. So the matrix of control are the settlements, home demolitions, the exclusive Jews-only roads, the military checkpoints, the separation barrier. All of them together control Palestine. So the pink areas, for example, have all been annexed. If you're living on the Jordan Valley as a Palestinian, you cannot travel through the Jordan Valley. Jericho is not surrounded by a wall, but it's surrounded by a 6 foot deep, 6 foot wide tank trap. You cannot drive in or out of Jericho apart from 2 roads, and both are heavily controlled by the Israeli military. So Jericho is a ghetto, Hebron is a ghetto, Ramallah is a ghetto. So the townships are heavily controlled by the Israeli military. It's a matrix of control. Now in 2021, I'm sorry you can't see the wording here, 2 major reports were published by Human Rights Watch and then by B'Tselem, both insisting that Israel is an apartheid state. B'Tselem is the Israeli human rights organization. This is apartheid, a regime of Jewish supremacy from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. And it explains how Israel divides, separates, and rules over the lives of Palestinians. In the entire area between the Mediterranean Sea and the Jordan River, the Israeli regime implements laws, practices, and state violence designed to cement the supremacy of one group, Jews, over another, Palestinians. And they achieve this largely through home demolitions, demolishing schools, making life intolerable and unbearable. Secondly, the Israelis have built Jews-only settlements in Palestine as a means of annexing the best of the land. So Bethlehem, for example, is today only 1/8 of the size Bethlehem was in 1967. If Bethlehem included all the hills around it, the shepherds' fields, the olive trees and so on. Now Bethlehem is surrounded by the wall. All of the land around it, from which the citizens of Bethlehem derive their income, has been taken by the settlements. And the irony is that 95 or 96% of children, Palestinian children, who are arrested by the Israeli military come from within 1 kilometer of a settlement. What are the Israelis doing? It's very shrewd. If friends over there are living within 1 kilometer of an Israeli settlement, the settlers, you're a threat to the settlers. So what do the Israeli military do? They take your son, your daughter, take them into military detention, which will pacify those families. Pacify the extended families. You won't attack the settlements. You won't do anything because you're afraid your children will never be released. So 95%, 96% of the children come from within 1 kilometer of a settlement. It's a way of sanitizing the land around the settlements. If you want more information on that, go to Defense of Children International, DCI, the Defense of Children International Palestine. They and another organization called Court Watch. Court Watch is a Palestinian organization involved with lawyers and barristers who monitor children who are in military detention in Israel. I think the majority of the people being released by Israel are children in those that are being released at the moment. And then the third element is the military checkpoints. Getting, for example, from Bethlehem to Ramallah might involve going through 6 military checkpoints. Those are the fixed ones, and then there are others that pop up on a daily basis. So if you're trying to get to a hospital in Ramallah from Bethlehem, or to get a document from your lawyer or something, it will take you at least a day to travel 15-20 miles, if you're lucky. And you have to be out before nightfall. So the military checkpoint, again, these are very dangerous places. If you're in a car, the difference between stop and go can be a flick of a finger. And you get that wrong, and you're giving the Israeli soldier an excuse to fire at your car. If he said stop and you carry on driving, he's going to shoot at you. Which is why checkpoints are very dangerous places. It creates a fragmented mosaic for Palestinians. The B'Tselem report concludes, fighting for a future based on human rights, liberty and justice is especially crucial now. There are various political paths to a just future between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea, but all of us must first choose to say no to apartheid. And then in February last year, Amnesty International published their report, Israel's Apartheid Against Palestinians, adding their voice to B'Tselem and Human Rights Watch. Amnesty International's new investigation shows that Israel imposes a system of oppression and domination against Palestinians across all areas under its control, in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories, against refugees in order to benefit Jewish Israelis. Amnesty insists apartheid is not acceptable anywhere in the world, so why has the world accepted it against Palestinians? Human rights have long been sidelined by the international community when dealing with decades-long struggle and suffering of Palestinians. Governments with the responsibility and power to do something have refused to take any meaningful action to hold Israel accountable. Instead, they've been hiding behind a moribund peace process at the expense of human rights and accountability. Unfortunately, the situation today is one of no progress toward a just solution and worsening human rights the Palestinians. Now this is where we come to homework. If, as Amnesty asserts, governments with the responsibility and power to do something have refused to take any meaningful action to hold Israel accountable, we must take responsibility for them. Which brings us to your homework. Our homework. Because your homework is really very simple. As I would say to the 16-year-olds, your homework is you're going to have to sort this out. When you leave school, you become bankers, politicians, lawyers, professionals. You are going to have to fix this. Because the impact of the Arab-Israeli conflict spins out to extremism, terrorism, racism, supremacism in other parts of the world. You're going to have to fix this. Your parents' generation have messed up. Your grandparents messed up. This has been going on 75 years. What are you going to do about it? And they'd stick their hands up and they would say, why can't they share the land? You see, it's not rocket science. It's as simple as that. But Israel has its hand in the jar and it's going to have to give up one of those cookies. And if Israel won't give up one of those cookies, our job is to persuade them and persuade our governments and society to assist in that process. So we need to take responsibility to become the inevitable solution. It goes back. You see, the crisis in Gaza did not begin on October the 7th with the Hamas attack. It began with a series of events with the infamous Balfour Declaration in 1917, where Britain promised the Jews a homeland, it promised to protect the rights of the Arabs, but we'd already promised the French we were going to keep it to ourselves. The secret Sykes-Picot, Sykes-Picot Agreement in 1915, we promised the French that having defeated the Germans in the First World War, we would claim the Middle East for our own colonies. So Syria and Lebanon would be part of the French Empire, Palestine, Jordan, Iraq would be part of the British Empire. We weren't promising the Jews a state, we were promising them a home in the British Empire. And from 1920 right through to 1947-48, the Jews and the Arabs both realized Britain wasn't going to give them what they wanted. Hence, Britain's exit strategy was the partition plan. I don't know if you've ever seen the partition plan. It's an amazing piece of realpolitik. If you take a chessboard, you've got black squares and white squares. And if you can visualize a chessboard, neither the white squares nor the black squares are contiguous. Black, white, white, black, black, white. There were 6 squares in Palestine. 3 squares were given to the Jews and 3 were given to the Palestinians. But neither was contiguous. It was Britain's exit strategy to force the Jews and the Arabs to fight each other while Britain got out. So it was a cynical ploy to give 3 parts of Palestine to the Jews and 3 parts. The Jews said yes, thank you, because they were being given half of what they didn't have. The Arabs said no, because they were being given half of what they already had. But it was a cynical ploy. And that's why the War of 48 and the War of 67 has seen Israel take most of that land into what is Israel today. So how do we take responsibility? This is it. The Palestinians were given the Gaza, they were going to be given the West Bank, and they were going to be given the Arab enclave in the north part of Galilee, and the Jews were going to be given the Jordan River, the Mediterranean, and the Sinai. Those were the 3 black squares, the 3 white squares. As you know, Israel took the West Bank from Jordan, the Golan from Syria, the Sinai from Egypt and Gaza. It gave back the Sinai in a deal with Egypt, but that was the consequence of 67. But under US protection, Israel has continued with impunity to steal more land, destroy more homes, and kill more Palestinians. We therefore need to take responsibility to become the inevitable solution to the Palestinian plight. How? By exposing the reality of Israeli apartheid and by helping to persuade Israelis that they must choose one of the two alternatives if they wish to be considered a democracy and enjoy lasting peace. It must choose between a two-state solution or a one-state solution. Now, there are three ways we can assist in this process. The first is to join the BDS movement, boycotts, divestments and sanctions. It's a Palestinian-led movement for freedom, justice and equality. It upholds the simple principle that Palestinians are entitled to the same rights as the rest of humanity. Inspired by the South African anti-apartheid movement, BDS urges action to pressure Israel to comply with international law. So, for example, the separation barrier, the Hafrada wall, is sponsored by numerous organizations, Western organizations, that we need to boycott to show our disapproval. Divestment campaigns urge banks, local councils, churches, mosques, pension funds, universities to withdraw investments from the State of Israel and Israeli and international organizations that sustain Israeli apartheid. Sanction campaigns pressure governments to fulfill their legal obligations to end Israeli apartheid. We have sanctions against North Korea, we have sanctions against Iran, we have sanctions against other countries. We need to have sanctions against Israel. BDS is now a vibrant global movement made up of unions, academic associations, churches, mosques and grassroots movements. In the UK, we've been engaging in BDS for a number of years and we've seen success in a number of projects. Ahava, can't see the sign, Ahava is a Jewish organization that takes Dead Sea products and makes them into beauty products, but the land is Palestinian and therefore it's illegal to sell those as Israeli goods. We've had a campaign against Ahava and they had to close their shop in Covent Garden, not because we were outside with banners. It was the other shops that forced them to close because they were losing trade. We had a campaign against Veolia. Veolia is a company that was helping to sponsor the light railway between Jerusalem and Mal Adumim, the Israeli settlement. Again, we targeted Veolia and they pulled out of that consortium. Caterpillar. We were involved in campaigning against Caterpillar. This is a D9 bulldozer. It's the height of a double-decker bus. It is weaponized, grenade launchers, machine gun turrets, and it's a principal weapon used by Israel to demolish Palestinian homes. We managed to get the Church of England to sell its shares in Caterpillar, and we've been campaigning against Caterpillar for a number of years. G4S, probably the world's leading security firm. G4S was responsible for running the Israeli prisons for children. Palestinian children under Israeli control was subcontracted to G4S. And under international law, what they were doing was illegal because the occupying power, it's forbidden for them to take residents of the occupied territories and move them into another country. Israel was taking the children from Palestine and putting them in Israeli prisons. And so we've had a campaign against G4S, and again, they have pulled out of that deal they had with the Israelis. The embarrassing thing was I gave a presentation very similar to this in Baghdad a few years ago for the Arab League. And it was a campaign against G4S. I was giving all the reasons why we needed to campaign against G4S. I came off the podium and there were two gentlemen in suits with ties who met me. And what I hadn't appreciated was that the conference was being beamed live on Iraqi TV. And again, what I didn't realize, thankfully, was that G4S was managing the security at Baghdad airport. So I'd caused some problems for the Iraqi regime. They wanted all the facts. And I kind of hope that G4S is no longer managing Baghdad airport. Martin Luther King said, "Non-violence is a powerful and just weapon. It's a weapon unique in history. It cuts without wounding. It is a sword that heals." So, join the BDS movement. Secondly, I invite you to join the One Democratic State campaign. Founded in 2018 by Palestinians with anti-colonial Israeli Jews, they have formed a 10-point program for founding one democratic state. When I was a student at university in the 70s, we campaigned against apartheid in South Africa. But if at the time you'd said to me, "Do you believe that apartheid will just disappear?" I'd have probably said no. If we'd said, "Do you believe that the Iron Curtain will disappear between Eastern Europe, communist Eastern Europe and West? Do you think it would just disappear without a war?" We'd have probably said, no. It's hard to imagine. But both have come down. So we must have vision and hope that we can achieve a one democratic state where Jews and Palestinians can live together as equals. But the one democratic state is based around a number of principles. A single constitutional democracy between the Mediterranean Sea and the Jordan River, where all citizens enjoy equal rights, freedom and security. Constitutional democracy with the authority to govern and make laws with the will of the people. Secondly, the right of return and reintegration. It's fundamental that the 700,000 who now constitute 6 or 7 million Palestinians in the diaspora, it's the largest refugee community in the world, in other countries, have the right to return, or at least compensation if they don't wish to return to historic Palestine. And then equal rights and no discrimination based on colour, gender, language, religion, political opinion or orientation. Those are 3 of the 10 points, but I invite you to look at the ODSC manifesto and join the campaign. And then finally, I invite you to consider joining the Convivencia Alliance. Convivencia Alliance. It's a coalition of Jewish, Muslim and Christian organizations supporting a just peace based on one democratic state. It was launched in London last year by the Jewish Network for Palestine, the Islamic Human Rights Commission and Peacemaker Trust. Convivencia simply means coexistence. It's an academic hypothesis proposed by a Spanish philologist, Americo Castro, and it was based on the coexistence that occurred in Spain from the Muslim Umayyad conquest in the 8th century until the expulsion of Jews by the Christian rulers in 1492. There was coexistence and respect between the faith communities. But again, the Convivencia Alliance has organized a number of important seminars from a Jewish perspective, Muslim perspective, Christian perspective. It's a proactive coalition. It's proactive. We commit ourselves to decolonizing Palestine and challenging Israeli apartheid. It's a cross-faith platform. We work together with those of other faiths with a shared common commitment, and we are committed to mobilizing a global effort in the decolonization of Palestine. I'm sorry you can't see the bottom of my slide. But if you go to convivencia.uk, you can see the numerous organizations around the world and leading academics who've joined the Convivencia Alliance. Convivencia.uk. That's it, convivencia.uk. So let me come back to my opening illustration. Israel has its hand in the cookie jar. It wants 3 cookies, 3 sweets, 3 biscuits, to be a democracy, to be a Jewish state, and keep Palestine. It can have 2, but not 3. It can withdraw to the 67 borders and allow a Palestinian state. That's the 2-state solution. Or it can cease being a Jewish state and share equal rights with Palestinians. That's the one democratic state. But if it can't or won't choose between the 2, we must do our homework and bring political and economic pressure to bear so that they realize, and the international community increasingly realizes, that it will not tolerate a racist, settler, colonial, apartheid state in Palestine. So I've shared with you 3 constructive ways we can be part of the solution, a proactive solution. And Israel will continue to solidify its apartheid regime. It will continue to exacerbate the plight of Palestinians unless and until we embrace either of the alternative solutions. Which is why I encourage you to join the BDS movement, the ODSC campaign, and the Convivencia Alliance. And I'll close with this quote. Again, I'm sorry you can't see the bottom of it, but Desmond Tutu, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, once said, "The end of apartheid stands as one of the crowning accomplishments of the past century. But we would not have succeeded," he said, "without the help of international pressure." He said, if apartheid ended, so can this occupation in Palestine. But the moral force and the international pressure will have to be just as determined. The question is, are you determined? Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Stephen Sizer. I really envy how he can read the text and still sound so very interesting. When I read the text, people will fall asleep. The reason is probably because it comes out from his heart. Anyway, let us open up the floor for Q&A or discussion. If you have any question to ask, because we don't want to waste time, straight away anybody has got, go ahead and identify yourself, and then please identify yourself first and then you.
Assalamualaikum. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I got one question.
Identify yourself first. Yeah. Siapa?
It's on.
Yeah, it's on. It's on.
Okay, alright.
Identify yourself.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
My name is Anku Fauzi, and I'm from an NGO, Islamic Information Services. And my question is, they always say that if people disagree with Zionist regime in Israel, we are judged as anti-Semitism.
Yes.
So I want to know what is Semitism and what is anti-Semitism. Thank you.
Okay. Yes. I've been accused of anti-Semitism for many years. And the first time you're accused of anti-Semitism, it's like having 666 on your forehead. And everyone thinks, you know. And sometimes I'm invited to speak somewhere and then I'm disinvited to speak somewhere. Because the Zionist lobby will put pressure on the college or the university to disinvite. So I get used to that. What they've done is they have redefined anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism, as with Islamophobia or Christophobia, is racism targeting an individual because of their ethnicity or their race. Racism is evil, it's wrong, it must be repudiated. But they have diluted the definition of anti-Semitism. They have conflated criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism. They've said that if you criticize Israel, you're criticizing Jews because it's a Jewish state and therefore you're being anti-Semitic. You have to kind of get over that and ignore it and remain proactive in critiquing what Israel's doing. And challenge the misuse of the definition. I don't know if in Malaysia you have, we call in the UK, what's the word? Homeopathic medicine. Are you familiar with the word homeopathic? You take a drug and you dilute it and dilute it and dilute it and dilute it, and the claim is that it helps stimulate the body. So please don't be offended if it sounds like I don't agree with homeopathic medicine. I don't. But homeopathy, they've done that to anti-Semitism. They've diluted it to the point where it's no longer a valid definition. Are you familiar with the children's story Chicken Little? Chicken Little?
Mm.
It's a story about a chicken who's always afraid the sky's falling in, the sky's falling in. And he tells all his friends the sky's falling in, and they say, no, it's not. And every time he says sky's falling in, they don't believe him because the sky's not falling in. But then when the sky does fall in, and he says the sky's falling in, they don't believe him because they're so used to not believing him. And the danger with anti-Semitism is by diluting the definition and saying if you criticize Israel, it's anti-Semitic. When there is genuine anti-Semitism, people shrug their shoulders because they're so used to it being diluted to cover so many other things. So we must be firm in our definition of anti-Semitism or Islamophobia. Prejudice or hostility or racism toward an individual because of their religion or ethnicity is wrong. It's always wrong. So stand with that, but refute attempts to dilute the definition to the point where you can't say anything against Israel because it's anti-Semitic.
Go ahead, Professor Roslan from Academy of Islamic Studies. So you don't have to introduce yourself.
Thank you, Dr. Stephens. It's very nice presentation this morning. I learned a lot from your presentation. My question is very simple. I would like to know what type of Christians that support this Christian Zionism. I remember once I visited Salt Lake City. There was a kind of model of Solomon Temple in Salt Lake City, and then they called the lake as similar to the lake in Palestine, this one. And then they named the river as River Jordan. Is there any relation between these two? Yeah, thank you.
So your question is, restate your question.
Yeah, my question is which type of, or which group of Christian that support this Christian Zionism?
Okay. Christian Zionism is an oxymoron. You can be a Christian or a Zionist, but you can't be both. It's like saying I'm a Christian racist. I'm a Muslim racist. You can't be a Muslim and a racist. You're either a Muslim or a racist, but you can't be both. And it's the same with Christian. Christian Zionism preceded Jewish Zionism by at least 50 years. You found in the early 19th century, there were Christian leaders speculating that we, Europeans, civilizing the world with our colonizing concepts, spreading Christianity, we must assist the Jews back to the land before Jesus comes back, before the Messiah comes back, because they misinterpreted passages in the Bible. Christian Zionism today is, there are 7 tenets of Christian Zionism, but the first one and the most important one, which explains why America is so pro-Zionist. In Genesis, God said to Abraham, I will bless those who bless you and I will curse those who curse you. All nations on earth will be blessed through you. Now it was a promise God made to Abraham, but it was not a promise that applied 3,000 years later to physical descendants of Abraham. It was a promise made to Abraham. But to cut a long story short, it's applied today. American Christians believe that God is blessing them because they bless Israel. materially, financially, and as long as America supports Israel, God will bless America. So it's a self-centered, materialistic, driven theology. We call it the health and wealth gospel. God will make you healthy and wealthy if you follow certain principles, and one of them is bless Israel. The Christian Zionist theology revolves around that principle, God's blessing. It believes that Jews remain God's chosen people, physically, that God gave them everything from the river of Egypt to the Euphrates, that Jerusalem is their capital, the temple's got to be rebuilt, and there'll be a war of Armageddon. And on the basis of that, their political agenda, if you believe that the Jews are God's chosen people, then you protect them, support them, fund them, encourage them to go back to Palestine. If you believe God gave them the land, then you support the settlement program. You fund the settlements. And there are Christian churches funding the settlements, funding Aliyah, encouraging Jews to leave Russia, Eastern Europe, and go and live in Israel. If you believe that Jerusalem is their eternal capital, what do? You move the US Embassy to Jerusalem. When Donald Trump promised to move the US Embassy to Jerusalem, he said, isn't it amazing, we moved the capital of Israel. He was right, because moving the US Embassy is a way of recognizing Jerusalem as the exclusive capital of Israel. No other country in the world recognizes Jerusalem as the capital. Tel Aviv is the capital. And then what he said was quite remarkable. He said, what I don't understand is the Jews were not particularly enthusiastic. It was the Christians who were enthusiastic about me moving the embassy. So you've got to move the embassy, because if the US moves its embassy to Jerusalem, everyone else has to follow suit. And if you believe the temple's going to be rebuilt, you've got to destroy the Dome of the Rock, destroy the Al-Aqsa Mosque, Haram al-Sharif, and rebuild the temple. And sadly, you find Christian groups facilitating that program. And if you believe that the world is going to end in a giant battle, then you don't waste time on climate change. You don't waste time on peace processes, because any peace which involves Israel withdrawing from land you believe God gave them, it must be from Satan. It must be from the devil. So they're very skeptical about the United Nations, about the peace process. So that their political agenda is driven by a warped, distorted theology. I liken it to a balloon. How many pins do you need to burst a balloon? Well, I'll give you 7. Any one of those pins will do. So if you go to my website, stephensizer.com, look under the books, you can find how we deconstruct Christian Zionism very easily. It's not hard.
Okay. But I think Stephen Roslan asked, which groups of Christians?
Which groups? Okay. Well, you may know, or you may or may not know, the early church in Jerusalem was taken over by the Roman Empire. When Rome, the Roman Empire, became Christianized, 325, so Rome took over the church. The church became the Roman church. And then when the Roman Empire split between East and West, you ended up with an Eastern church, Eastern Orthodox, and you had the Roman Catholic Church. The Eastern Orthodox Church split between the Assyrians, the Russians, the Greeks. So you have national churches within the Eastern Church. The Roman Catholic Church split in the Reformation into the Anglican Church, the Lutherans, the Baptists, the Methodists, lots of denominations. Then when the Pilgrims went to the States, America is a very large country, you do find the European denominations in America, but the churches that are really taken off in America are independent. They are geographically located. They may have 10,000, 20,000, 50,000 members. They're often driven by television evangelists, by, So those are the churches. They're Pentecostal, charismatic, health and wealth churches are largely the ones that drive the Christian Zionist lobby, not the European historic mainstream denominations. Okay?
And we've been talking about bringing pressure onto Israel Now, Israel's strength derives in large part from American support. Should you not then bring your pressure towards America, USA, as well as Israel?
So can you summarize the question? It wasn't very clear, sorry.
Should you not then direct your pressure against USA as well as
Yes.
Israel?
And I'm not a politician. I'm a theologian, so I rely on others to work out how to do it. But there is something fundamentally wrong with the Security Council, where one of the Security Council members, the US, Russia, China, can veto the will of the hundreds of countries within the United Nations. I think that mass involvement of individuals like us shape government policy. You know that politicians in Europe, certainly Britain, they work on a 4-year cycle. We elect our politicians and they have their vision of what they're going to do in the country, but as the time approaches for the next election, they are listening to which issues will get them re-elected. And I don't have any solutions to how we change American foreign policy. All I would say is that the younger generation of American citizens are much more savvy about what's happening in Palestine because they use social media. The older generation, our generation, still read the New York Times, the Washington Post, the mainstream media, which is heavily controlled by the Zionist lobby. So within a generation, we are going to see a radical change in American society, but it's still coming. And it's certainly true in Europe that the younger generations are much more aware because they use social media, they're aware of what's happening in Gaza. They don't rely on the monopolized mainstream media, which is controlled by a few individuals who are biased toward Israel.
Okay, I may just add a few paragraphs. I agree totally with what you said, that America is the fundamental or the main factor that allows Israel to continue what it's doing now, and pressure should be put on American. But as you said just now, rightly, that Americans are doing this. Thousands of demonstrators now on the streets in major cities in the US, much more than the crowds in Malaysia. If you get about 1,000 people, we're happy. Over there, they have got hundreds of thousands of people demonstrating. So they are doing their bit over there in America, but I think in the other parts of the world, other countries should put pressure on America. Unfortunately, many countries are scared of putting pressure on America. Aside from just saying, they do not dare to do anything more because they are afraid of American sanctions, whatever, right? So countries of the world, I don't have to mention the name of the countries, you can know yourself, they just say, but they dare not do anything concrete when it comes to putting pressure on America. Blame the leaders of these countries. So
I think just to add to that, I'm a great believer in alliances and coalitions of countries working together. So I don't believe either China or Russia are any better or worse necessarily than America in terms of their foreign policy. They have their own agenda. But the reality is the global south has increasing influence and power. The coalitions of countries in the global south working together for common good will help neutralize America's influence. You go back 100 years, who were the dominant powers in Asia? It was the Dutch, it was the French, it was the British. Where are they now? They have very little influence in Asia now. So we mustn't give up thinking, oh, America is great, it's powerful, we can't do anything about it. History has a tendency, the arc of history bends toward justice, and we need to be part of that curve toward justice.
Okay, yeah, go ahead. Oh, Zahuri.
My name is Zahuri. I love your cookie jar image. That
Because
will
now
remain,
you can use it.
yeah, that will remain with me, when I go out and forever. But anyway, I just came back from South Africa. Again, I had all throughout a black girl who was, showing us around. When I asked her, she's like forgotten all about apartheid because they've integrated so much. And I thought, wow, you know, I thought this is so great. I mean, like you as well, you know, in those times, and I'm probably older than you even, you know, you would never have thought that that would be possible, especially when you go to the museum and saw how it was so bad, but it happened. Now, and to me, when I saw it happened because they had people like Nelson Mandela, they had Desmond Tutu, and they had, so the whole international community going along with BDS, you know, and so on. And so glad to hear that BDS is working so well where you are concerned. I'm not really sure whether that's happening, Prof. Nazari, in Malaysia.
Inshallah.
Yeah. So my question is there, you know, I think leadership is important. So in the Palestinian, you know, context, is there such leaders that can actually bring this one-state solution or two-state solution and make it all a reality, or is it going to be quite a long wait for us?
There is a deficit of Palestinian leaders. There is the old guard, the Palestinian Authority, who have compromised their independence by accepting money from America, working with the Israelis on common security issues. They've been neutralized. There is a younger generation coming up, but the Israelis have been very shrewd in targeting individuals who they fear would be the next generation of Palestinian leaders. Invariably, in the occupied territories, universities will be shut down at examination time. They will make it difficult for students to graduate. You know, they've targeted universities in Gaza. They've destroyed a number of the universities in Gaza. They do not want an intelligent, articulated Palestinian leadership. They want young men, particularly, who are radicalized, who will use violence, because then they can kill them, they can shoot them, they can bomb them. They want terrorists. They don't want to have to rationally debate the kind of issues we've looked at today with Palestinian leaders. The irony is that Palestinians value their education, and they have a very high ratio of PhDs for their community compared to many other countries. So we must work with and pray for a new Palestinian leadership to emerge. But just in the same way that South Africa imprisoned Nelson Mandela and others in solitary confinement for decades, the Palestinians Israelis use administrative detention without trial, so individuals can be lost in the judicial system for months or years with no trial, no charges. It's no different to the Russian gulags. So we must expose that. We must speak out when we see what's happening.
I just want to follow up. Okay. Just a follow up to Prof. Zahri's name.
I think he has the microphone.
All right.
Good afternoon. Good morning still. Okay. My name is Indina Raja. Thank you for coming to visit us here. My question is, do you think that the Arab world are helping the Palestinians enough?
No.
Second question.
It's also kind of similar, but just now she was asking about identifying a leader from Palestine itself. What about leaders from the regions? Sort of like, you know, what are the Arab leaders doing? Can we take one of them to be our hero or heroine?
The problem with Arab leaders, again, if you go back to the 19th century, when the European powers were drawing lines on the map, creating Saudi Arabia, Iraq, the Gulf states, carving Lebanon out of Syria, we identified families that were pro-British, pro-French, whoever, and we made them kings. We gave them wealth. They found oil and they became very prosperous. So they are not necessarily leaders that have grown through a democratic process. They are they have their own agendas, and you may know that the US uses the carrot and the stick. So if you look at where Israel is, you've got Egypt to the south, Jordan to the east, Syria and Lebanon. Lebanon and Syria get the stick. Iraq get bombed, attacked virtually every day by Israel. Egypt is the second largest recipient of US aid after Israel. Why? To keep them pacified. To keep them, they need the American money. This is not necessarily a criticism, but the Egyptian army basically runs much of the business and industry in the country because this funding comes in from America. Jordan is a sensitive situation. It's pro-Western and caught between the two, with a large Palestinian majority now within Jordan. It's got to play both sides. So you've got the carrot and the stick, and then you've got the Gulf states. The normalization process was intended to bypass Palestine, to build bridges with Saudi Arabia and Israel. The good thing is that Iran is talking to Saudi Arabia now. That wasn't part of the Abrahamic Accords.
But short comment, don't bother to rely on the Arab leaders. We have to do something about it.
Okay. Morning, Stephen. Thank you. My name is Yam. My question is, you've mentioned about Balfour and the British having a hand in creating the Palestinian and the Jewish states, right? Now, surely Britain has a moral responsibility to solve this problem in crafting their foreign policies. Do you have a comment on that? Thank you.
Historically, Britain has a responsibility. The problem is that the Israel lobby has an inordinate influence over British politicians, and so the centenary of the Balfour Declaration, 2017, instead of being an opportunity to say sorry and acknowledge Britain's failure to deliver in the promises we made, it was exploited as if the Balfour Declaration was a wonderful thing because we created the State of Israel. So Britain is still our leaders are still in denial over our history in the same way we are in China and other places where we sought to build our empire. Britain doesn't have hardly any influence with Israel.
They supply weapons. No. So don't bother to rely on them.
So yes, there's a responsibility, but if we won't give back the Greek Elgin marbles, we're not likely to do anything to threaten our relationship with Israel. The hypocrisy is there. We believe in the two states, but we won't recognize one of them. If you won't recognize a Palestinian state, how can you believe in the two-state solution?
So it's kind of like in a state of denial and no hypocrites. I don't know.
Yes. Just to pick up what our friend said about her visit to South Africa, South Africa is not a bed of roses. It's not. Yes, apartheid ended, but the discrimination, the racism, the prejudice is still there, the poverty is still there. The reconciliation process was a good one, but there wasn't restitution. With Palestine, there must be restitution for homes demolished, for land confiscated. We can't just say we forgive and forget, because that still leaves 6-7 million refugees around the world wanting to go home.
Okay, any other question? Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Huda. I came along from Sarawak. So my question to you is, since from the past until today, we've been seeing that the international laws are made up by those who have great influence, such as those the European powers or the Western powers. So, and from the past until today, we've been seeing that they are repeating crimes being done by the same power. So, should we review all these laws so that it shouldn't be from the definition of these powers? That's my question.
Okay. The issue of international law, what you have are politicians who want to bend international law to fit with their political agenda, and then you have barristers, lawyers, judges who want international law to remain impartial, neutral, and unchanged. So the International Criminal Court, the Court of Justice, the concept of genocide, apartheid, war crimes, we must hold them sacrosanct and not allow our politicians to dilute or detract from the reality, because a war criminal is a war criminal, and it's behoven on the entire international community to hold individuals who commit war crimes accountable. And you know, if someone who's been designated a war criminal visits Malaysia, it's the responsibility of the Malay government to arrest them at the airport and send them to The Hague for trial. So we must hold that. So for example, in the UK, we have a close relationship with Israel. Israeli politicians come in and out of London to do their shopping and, you know, whatever. A group of lawyers took out an injunction to arrest an individual, a politician, who had been criticized for justifying genocide, to the point where they would not come to the UK, and the UK government had to change its policies to allow them to come. So if we make use of those who have legal experience, judges, lawyers, barristers, they are the best people to ensure that our politicians comply with international law.
Okay, since Stephen arrived quite late last night, and also jet lag and everything, so we don't want to torture him too much. So I want to ask a question to clarify the audience. In Malaysia, many Malaysians see the situation in Palestine to be a conflict between Muslims and Jews. So they talk a lot about Jews. But in your lecture just now, you mentioned that 9 out of 10 of Zionists are Christians, and they are the ones that are really giving support to Israel. So we are talking about Zionism, which consists 9 out of 10 to be Christian rather than Jews. So in other words, Jews only constitute 10% of the project, sort of. So can you please explain, and also we were having a discussion last night that there were many groups of Jews, and there are Jews who are against, many who are against the state of Israel, and now spearheading or very involved in the BDS movement. Can you please explain to the audience here this issue of, is it against Jews or what?
Yeah. I think it's important that we are clear in our terminology. When we criticize Israeli policies, when we criticize Zionism, we're not criticizing Jews for being Jews. We're criticizing something that's racist, irrespective of who's perpetrating it. So I avoid using the term Jew or Jewish as a synonym for Israel or Zionism. I emphasize that Zionism as a political system is a racist political system, supremacism that elevates one race group over others. And so our criticism is of apartheid, prejudice, supremacism, colonialism that is being perpetrated by Zionists who happen to be Jews, but backed and supported and funded by Zionists who happen to be Christians, who may be supported by Muslims who are sympathetic to Zionism because it's in their best interest to maintain a relationship with Israel. Some of the Gulf states, for example. Because everyone wants to be on the right side of America, and therefore America insists, well, if you're going to be on our side, you've got to be on Israel's side. So, you know, we must be aware of where the money comes from and the implications of the the words that we use.
Yeah, so you said just on Muslim sympathetic to Zionism. I would call them Muslim Jews. Sorry, Muslim Zionists. Muslim Zionists. So Zionists can be Muslims or Arabs or even Malays. Malay Zionists. Has somebody asked a question? Or somebody?
Yeah, just a quick one.
Oh, yeah.
If I may.
Last one. This is the last one.
Last one. But thank you, Dr. Sizer. I think your presentation, I came in sleepy this morning and I'm now wide awake.
Because you have homework.
Fantastic insights that I learned a lot this morning. Just a quick question. What is the role of Turkey in this picture? Because from the looks of it, they are between a rock and a hard place, yeah? Being with NATO and European Union. Their position, number one. And number
Sorry,
two,
what is, say it again.
the
Your
position
question.
of Turkey.
Yes.
Turkey with regards to the Palestinian issue, yeah? Because they're also part of the Western Alliance. So what is the position? One. Number two, just another quick question. Is it possible to pull, for example, Netanyahu to the International Criminal Court? In today's scenario, you know, they are very efficient when it comes to Putin, but will it happen to Netanyahu? Because the evidence is so clear and so open. Thank you.
There's no reason why Netanyahu can't be arrested if he travels out. I assume he might be arrested before then for the other crimes he's committed in Israel. I think his days are numbered. But his competitors are just as extreme in their political views. So Turkey has an important role to play. Turkey is part of that bridge between Europe, Asia and Africa. Yes, it was a colonial power. The Ottoman Empire ruled over Palestine, sided with Germany and Italy against Britain, lost its influence in Palestine. At the moment, Turkey is advocating for Palestinians. There's a link with Hamas, with the Brotherhood. I'm in favor of anyone who's willing to stand up and challenge Israel in its behavior. The fact that Turkey is part of NATO and wants to be part of Europe is, hopefully they will use their influence to shape European policy.
So it's being very diplomatic. My own assessment is Turkey is very unreliable. Sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes up, and then suddenly it announced to expand its, sorry if I Stephen, expands relationship with Israel, right? Trade relationship, etc., etc. So it's very unpredictable and not very reliable in my book anyway. So we have come to the end. Sorry, Stephen is quite exhausted now. Thank you for your excellent lecture. Thank you to Council for Civilization Dialogue again for collaborating with us to organize this. Thank you to all of you for coming here despite your busy schedule. And as I said just now, we have our conference starting tomorrow, and also it's a 2-day conference, and also Thursday. You can also follow our conference on our Facebook, Hashim Sani Center for Palestine Studies Facebook Live. This one is supposed to be also on Facebook, but then technical problem. But it's recorded and you can view that later on Pusat Dialogue's website. Hopefully everything's okay. Okay, thank you very much again, and see you one day or tomorrow. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.